The Soviet Union built a supersonic strike platform so deadly that the men who flew it gave it a name, the Maneater. It killed dozens of aviators. It shot pilots straight down into the earth during emergencies. And those same pilots begged for a seat in the cabin anyway. Why? Because the machine carried 450 liters of drinkable alcohol, a 40% ethanol mixture, a flying bar you could push past the speed of sound. This is the Tupolev Tu-22, and it might be the strangest thing the Cold War ever put in the sky. A nuclear weapon platform that doubled as a liquor store with wings. How does that even happen? That is the whole story right there. And it only gets stranger from here. The story begins on June 21st, 1958. That is the day the prototype lifted off for the first time over Soviet soil. Tupolev wanted a jet that could outrun Western fighters and carry a nuclear payload deep into enemy territory. On paper, it looked like the future. In the air, it was a nightmare. By 1962, when the Tu-22 entered active service, its reputation had already curdled. Pilots called it unstable, punishing. A plane that seemed to want you dead. And here is the part the design bureau never advertised. This machine needed enormous quantities of alcohol just to work. Not as fuel, as lifeblood. The hydraulics ran on it. The de-icing system ran on it. The heat-shedding system in the flight deck ran on it. And that single engineering choice transformed a serious war machine into a legend for all the wrong reasons. So let's talk about the booze, because there were 3 separate systems on this thing, and they all mattered. The big one fed the hydraulics and the de-icing lines with pure grain ethanol, the same stuff you would find in a strong drink, sloshing through the plumbing on every single flight. Then came the second system. The cabin air conditioning system relied on a specific formulation of 40% ethanol mixed with 60% distilled water. This particular ratio represented nothing less than pure vodka, not something merely similar, not a cheap imitation. It matched the exact chemical profile of standard Soviet vodka, chilling the air that entered the flight deck. The engineers built a minibar that happened to fly, and they did it on purpose. If a supersonic booze carrier sounds like your kind of history, subscribe to the channel. You will start noticing how many bizarre secrets are hiding inside the machines of the Cold War. Now, what happens when you park a jet full of drinkable ethanol on a base full of cold, bored, underpaid airmen? Exactly what you would expect. Operators drained the fluid tanks. They drank straight from the aircraft. And when they were not drinking it, they were trading it, because on a Soviet base. In the 60s and 70s, liquor was money, not just something you sipped. It bought favors, spare parts, and silence. The men handed the plane names that told you everything you needed to know. The supersonic booze carrier, Shiloh, which means all, the flying liquor store. 1 aircraft, 3 nicknames, all pointing at the same obsession. This jet was cherished for what flowed through its veins, not for its sped or its payload. And nobody stopped it, because the officers were pouring themselves the same cup. That same plane the operators adored for its supply was quietly killing them. They called it Ludoed, and it earned every bit of that reputation. Out of more than 300 Tu-22s ever built, over 70 vanished in catastrophic incidents. Not in combat, in peacetime. Doing training runs and routine flights over friendly ground. 70 airframes. Gone. That is a horrifying attrition rate, wiped out without a single enemy pulling a trigger. Think about those odds every time an operator walked to the flight line. You had a genuine chance of not coming home, and you knew it before you even climbed the ladder. So why keep flying it? Why fight for a flight deck with a body count like that? Part of the answer sits in those fluid tanks, and part of it is far darker, because the Tu-22 hit a design flaw so cruel it sounds invented. The ejection seats fired downward, down, into the ground. On almost every other aircraft, you punch up and away, and the parachute saves your life. On this one, if disaster hit at low altitude, the seat rocketed you straight at the earth below. You needed a minimum of 350 meters of height just for a fighting chance. Anything lower during takeoff, landing, or a low pass, and your escape system became your executioner. The device meant to save you would finish you instead. 350 meters, or you were gone. And Soviet airmen spent plenty of time flying below that number. So these operators rode a plane that crashed constantly, bolted into seats that could kill them even when they had done everything right. The cruelty did not stop at the seats. 3 men flew every Tu-22, a pilot, a navigator, and a radio operator who doubled as the gunner. Those 3 sat in 3 sealed, isolated compartments with no way to reach one another, no internal passage. If things went wrong, you were alone in your box. On May 21st, 1973, near Zhytomyr, that design turned lethal. During a mid-air collision, the pilot ejected without a single word to his team. No warning. Nothing. The radio operator died during his ejection, and the navigator, with no idea the pilot had already gone, kept calling out over the radio. "Commander, don't descend!" He was begging an empty seat, pleading with a man who had already saved himself and abandoned them. 3 souls in 3 boxes, and only one of them got to make a choice. Tell me that plane was not cursed. For years, the West had no clue any of this was going on. Then came September 6th, 1976. A Soviet pilot named Viktor Belenko flew a MiG-25 interceptor across the border and defected, landing in Japan and dropping a gold mine into Western intelligence. Out of everything he told investigators, one detail floored them. Soviet flyers were drinking the alcohol straight out of their own combat aircraft. He explained that windshields on those jets kept icing over in flight. Ground crews drank the de-icing ethanol and refilled the tanks with standard tap water. This substitution occurred on a machine engineered to push past. Mach 3. The pilot climbs, the windshield freezes solid, and suddenly he can't see, all because somebody on the ground wanted a nip. The West finally got the picture. This defined the entire culture. If this is landing the way it is landing for a lot of people, take a second to hit like. It genuinely helps push this story to more folks who love the strange corners of history. But the ones who suffered worst were not always the men in the flight deck. In the 1970s, the wives of airmen at Tu-22 base had watched enough. Their husbands came home changed. The bottomless supply of coolant ethanol was turning steady men into alcoholics, and everyone on that base knew it. So the women did something bold for the Soviet military of that era. They put their names to a formal complaint and sent it up to the base commander. They spelled out the problem in plain words. The plane's own refrigeration system was tearing their families apart. And the commander's answer? 9 words that tell you exactly how much anyone in charge cared. Women, do not concern yourself with military matters. That was it. Complaint dismissed. Problem buried. The taps kept running, the marriages kept crumbling, and the brass shrugged and stared at the ceiling. Classic. Eventually, somebody higher up tried to kill the drinking for good. Their bright idea? Replace the drinkable ethanol with methanol, a toxic wood alcohol that can blind or kill you if you swallow it. On paper, problem solved. Nobody drinks poison. But the operators fought back, and they fought dirty. They understood something the planers ignored. Methanol was undrinkable, and its fumes could seep into the cabin and blind or kill the pilot mid-flight. So they manufactured a lie. Airmen swore the climate control system was leaking vapor into the cabin. And to sell it during inspections, they stuffed alcohol-soaked rags into the vents so the test flights would reek of leaking ethanol and back up their story. Genius, right? Deceptive, reckless, and completely effective. The methanol switch never fully stuck. The good stuff stayed. And the men kept their stash, one soaked rag at a time. Why would trained professionals gamble their lives on a design that wanted them dead, just to keep the taps open? You have to understand life on those bases. Frezzing. Remote. Endless grinding boredom, broken only by the fear of the next flight. Pay scales remained thin. Comforts were fewer. And here was this machine offering the one thing everybody wanted, industrial volume, for nothing. In that world, it was currency, comfort, and coping. The plane that could take your life was also the plane that made the days survivable. That is the trap. That is why they climbed aboard. Not because they were fools, because the system left them almost nothing else to hold on to. The ground teams developed specialized tools, including rubber tubes and custom key wrenches to bypass security seals on the drainage valves. They filed canteens and canisters with the precious fluid. This systematic extraction showed how resourceful people could be in the face of brutal scarcity. Now think about what this strike platform was actually built to do. This was no trainer or cargo hauler. The Tu-22 was a long-range strategic nuclear bomber designed to hit targets deep in hostile territory and outrun the fighters sent to stop it. It carried the weight of Soviet deterrence on its shoulders. It was part of the muscle meant to hold the West in check, and its own operators were siphoning off the fluids that kept it airworthy. Picture the contradiction. One of the most serious weapons in the arsenal, undermined not by spies, not by sabotage, but by thirst. The de-icing failed because the ethanol was already gone. The systems keeping men alive at altitude were being drained on the tarmac. A superpower's nuclear reach, eaten away from the inside by the very people trusted to fly it. So how does a story this warped finally end? Slowly. The Tu-22 kept flying through the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, piling up loses the entire way. By the mid-1990s, the Russian Air Force officially retired the original design for good. Nearly 40 years in service for a plane its own pilots had spent decades dreading. Its successor, the Tu-22M3, is a different beast entirely, rebuilt with modern climate control that does not double as a bar tab, and it still flies today. The drinkable coolant era is finished. The old nicknames faded, but the stories refuse to die. You can retire an aircraft. You can scrap the airframes and lock the hangars. You cannot erase what happened inside those 3 little sealed boxes. Here's what gets me about the whole thing. This was not a secret program that went sideways in some lab. This was hundreds of men, across decades, making the exact same brutal bargain again and again. Risk the drop, take the drink. And the people in charge knew. The commanders knew. The wives told them straight. The Defector told the West about the MiG-25. Everyone knew. And the machine kept flying, kept crashing, kept pouring its alcohol into cups on the flight line. The wrecks piled up. The marriages shattered. And all of it wrapped around the oldest human weakness there is. The Tu-22 did not fail because the engineering was bad. It failed because of what people chose to do with it. So the next time someone tells you the Cold War was all cold logic, remember this machine. A supersonic strike platform whose own operators called it a beast and who climbed aboard anyway, because it held something they craved more than they feared dying. That is the question this whole story leaves you with. What makes a grown man strap into a seat that could fire him into the dirt for a drink? Not courage, not duty, just the quiet, grinding desperation a hard life breeds in ordinary people. The Tu-22 flew for almost 40 years, and it never once needed an enemy to take its operators. It managed that entirely on its own. If this story stayed with you, like and subscribe. There is a whole hangar of stranger history still waiting to be told.